My name is Adam Levitan. Each and every Wednesday, we are here to discuss our rest of season top 150 rankings, how those play into the season-long trade market, our redraft trade calculator, buy lows, sell highs, and more. I want to start with a few interesting situations here revolving around some of the bad teams in the league, and it can get really hairy this time of year. We have the trade deadline coming up on November 4th. That is the NFL trade deadline, not the fantasy league trade deadline. NFL trade deadline is indeed November 4th. I want to start with the player, Mark, that I think everyone assumes is going to get traded. Now, it's dangerous to assume in the NFL that guys are going to get traded. This is not like the NBA. This is not like Major League Baseball. These teams are not as aggressive usually as they should be. And I think the Raiders would be crazy not to be sellers, especially if guys who are contract situation merits it. And so Jakobi Meyers has been the most likely fantasy impacted player to get traded. I think they also have his direct backup here in Jack Besh, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for them to get a look at him. I've seen some people try to drop Jakobi Meyers in leagues. We have him up here at 87 overall. If he went to the Patriots, that would be kind of exciting, I feel like. So, Mark, if Jakobi Meyers was out there on waivers, what kind of priority would you add him? And what do you think about Jakobi rest of season outlook versus these rest of the Raiders?
It's certainly hard to know and comment on Jakobi without, a potential landing spot figured out here for him. But I do think he's certainly, a talented NFL wide receiver. And if he were to get traded, would likely, I think, slot in as a wide receiver to somewhere and anywhere, I think is going to be better than this Raiders pass game at the moment. So I do think it would probably be an upgrade regardless of where Jakobi Meyers landed. I do think he's worth a speculative add if anyone has dropped him. Not necessarily someone I would like target in a trade necessarily, expecting better rest of season production, but certainly if he's out there on waivers, people have given up on him. I think he is a worthwhile add. I do think Jack Besh, as you alluded to, is an interesting kind of stash in deeper leagues if you need it. But overall, like the Raiders as a whole, I'm not super excited in investing in. The Jakobi Meyers target share has been solid this season, but the Raiders down the stretch have a really tough schedule. They play the Cowboys in week 11, but otherwise, man, you look at their schedule and it's, Denver twice. They get the Houston Texans defense. They get the Browns, they get the Eagles, a lot of strong defenses down the stretch for the Raiders. So even if Jakobi Meyers were to leave and leave a void there, I'm not sure there's many Raiders I'd want on my roster outside of Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty. I do think Trey Tucker is fine as well, but and certainly the volume would help for him. But yeah, I think, Raiders right now in fantasy, a tough investment to get excited about.
Yeah, I like holding Jakobi Meyers. One other team besides the Patriots that I think makes sense is the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have been looking for wide receiver 2 help for a long time. I don't think they're really contenders, but I'm sure in their head they think they're contenders. And so making a move for Jakobi Meyers, and instead of this ridiculous 3 tight end formations and 4 tight end formations, get an actual wide receiver on the field there with DK Metcalf, I think would make some sense for them. Let's go to some other bad teams and their outlooks rest of season, because this is really tough. Daigle, let's go to Dolphins. I would say this is the bottom for the Dolphins, getting absolutely wrecked by Dylan Gabriel and the Cleveland Browns. But I kind of expected it. Like, the Dolphins do not travel well to poor weather spots, and this was a poor weather spot. Now, they've had plenty of fine weather spots where they've underperformed also this season. Tua looks really, really bad. We still have Devon Achane up here at 11 overall, Jalen Waddle at 29 overall, Ollie Gordon 147. We do not have any other Dolphins ranked. And by the way, breaking news this morning, Darren Waller is going to miss at least 4 weeks with his pectoral injury. So, Daigle, how do you think about handling Dolphins rest of season? You could still get a lot. If you want to get out from under Devon Achane, I'm not saying that I do. If you want to get out from under Devon Achane, you probably still could right now for a pretty decent price. Daigle, any thoughts on Dolphins rest of season?
That's the way I feel about Jalen Waddle as well, where I'm at least asking around and seeing what managers will give for these players. Otherwise, I don't mind holding them and potentially going down with the ship. And that's the real issue here. As soon as this week. I believe Dolphins play the Falcons. Falcons have a top 3 defense. The Niners got George Kittle back and ran the ball with ease. Otherwise, though, it's another miserable matchup for Miami. And if you think the Dolphins offense is struggling with Tua while they have Mike McDaniels, just wait for a game or two when they don't. And now they're suddenly looking at Quinn Ewers to evaluate him the rest of the year. And that's the concern, is that now all the volume, at least we can say, goes to Waddle and HN. But what does that volume look like without McDaniels, without Tua, and for how long? So I'm shopping them around. If I get stuck holding them again, I can ride that out and figure it out later. But I'm at least asking around right now.
Yeah. There's been a lot of Jalen Waddle trade rumors ahead of the deadline. From what I understand, that's just not going to happen. And I don't think it makes sense. Like, why would you give up Jalen Waddle, who is on a very team-friendly contract? Like, the wide receiver contracts have exploded since Jalen Waddle signed his, and they actually have Jalen Waddle on a pretty good deal right now. So I don't think he would get traded. I will say on the schedule stuff for Miami, they are home against the Bengals in week 16, home against the Bucs in week 17. I mean, those are 2 pretty good spots if you can keep this team's head on straight here. I don't know that you can. Silva and I talked yesterday about the chances of Mike McDaniel getting fired. I don't care what the owner says. Like, owner stuff is just meaningless. He could say, I don't want to fire Mike McDaniel. We're not going to make a move, and then tomorrow do it. So I'm still worried about Mike McDaniel here. But yeah, I'd still be asking for a decent amount if I was trying to move Achane and Waddle, I think is the bottom line. Let's go to the Jets, Jack. I mean, the team total for the Jets in week 7 against the Panthers was like 20.5 points. And everybody laughed and they said, that's a ridiculous line. And it never really moved. And then they go out and score like 3 points or 6 points or whatever. And everybody's like, see, I told you guys, nobody knows anything. The most liquid in the market, most liquid sports market in the world, Jack, still thought that the Jets were going to perform on offense, and they didn't. Now people are in full-blown panic. There are plenty of Breece Hall trade rumors out there. Also, if you had Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson, Jack, how are you playing it right now?
I kind of think you have to hold those guys just because I don't really know who's going to give you anything for them. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Breece. It would essentially be a trade for potentially a half-season rental for a running back because Breece Hall is an unrestricted free agent after this season. So we'll see if a team wants to give up draft compensation to either get him for half a season or pay him pretty solid running back money, presumably. But yeah, it's pretty disastrous on offense for the Jets. They bench Fields at halftime, put in Tyrod. He doesn't do a whole lot better. It seems like Aaron Glenn wants to start Tyrod, but he's day-to-day right now with an injury, so they might have to go back to Fields. They still haven't won a game. It wouldn't be a total shock if we get into December and Brady Cook starts getting looks, just to see what they have in him as the rookie quarterback there. So it's definitely really ugly for the Jets. But I definitely don't think they're buy lows as a result, but I don't really think you can trade them just because you're not going to get anything.
Yeah, I kind of think the market views these Jets guys way lower than we have it. We have Breece Hall 33 and Garrett Wilson 55 here right now. I do think Tyrod Taylor is just like a better natural thrower than Justin Fields by a pretty decent margin. Not that Tyrod Taylor is a good thrower, but better than Justin Fields by a pretty decent margin. And like when Garrett Wilson comes back, which probably won't be until after their week 9 bye, which sucks because he's going to miss this game against the Bengals most likely. But when he comes back, I do think he'll be a focal point. I will say, obviously he'll be a focal point. Week 17, home game for the Jets against the Patriots is not the greatest spot that I could draw up for Garrett Wilson. They do get to play the Saints in week 16, Jaguars in week 15 here. On the Breece Hall trade stuff, somebody had said they thought that Jets, like they talked to some executive and they thought that a 5th round pick is what the Jets could get for Breece Hall. If I'm the Jets, do I need to get rid of him that badly to get like a 5th round pick? It's like, what is that really worth? I'd probably do it personally, but I don't think NFL teams really do. So I really kind of doubt that Breece Hall ends up getting traded. Chargers, Chiefs, Texans have been speculated as fits I've seen. But yeah, I kind of think Breece Hall ends up staying here and kind of riding this out in this really awful situation for the Jets.
If you are in Superflex leagues, though, because right now I know a lot of managers are scrambling for any kind of starting quarterback. If you have Justin Fields, you do get straight to the point and go pick up Tyrod Taylor, assuming then you can have at least one starting quarterback. Don't get involved in the Andy Dalton, Marcus Mariota fiascos, because then you're just kicking the can down the road. Ignore it. Pick up Tyrod, and then for whatever it's worth, you can then have the Jets starting quarterback for a little bit till you can figure it out later.
Yeah. I actually picked up Tyrod last week in one of those super deep dynasty leagues that I somehow got conned into playing. And I feel good about having him on my team right now. All right. Let's go to another bad team here, Mark, the New Orleans Saints. So Kendre Miller was lost for the season due to a torn ACL. If you wanted to try to sell Alvin Kamara right now, you can make the argument, hey, he's about to get all the work. Kendre Miller's down. I'm not sure that's the case. And I'm not sure Alvin Kamara has enough left in the tank. But if I drafted Alvin Kamara, which thankfully I didn't really at all this year, but if I did, it could be an interesting time to try to get out from under Kamara right now, Mark. We're at 70 overall on Kamara. Thoughts on him?
I agree on selling high on Kamara. This is a spot we talked about on the call a bit last night and had people chime in our Slack on ranks thinking that Kamara should be a little higher, but I'm a little bearish on the outlook here. You have the offensive line that's a mess right now. They just lost their center Eric McCoy for the season with a biceps injury. You have Taysom Hill, who is liable to take goal line work away from Alvin Kamara. So far this season, Taysom has one rush attempt inside the 5-yard line. Kamara only has one as well. Kamara, 30-year-old back who, as of right now, has produced career low efficiency numbers. And then I'm just skeptical that the Saints, given their record at this current point in time, and I expect it not to get too much better down the line, that they're just going to load him up with touches down the stretch. So I do think now is a potential sell high spot on Kamara, but I realize there could be some potential upside here for him. I'm just not necessarily in that camp. I would say the good thing about the Saints is they do get the Panthers, Jets, and Titans in the fantasy playoffs for those first two games at home. So you can maybe dream on it a little bit, but I think Kamara is pretty much going to be like a 15 touch guy week in and week out. They do have a rookie, Devin Neal, to give a look at here. Not necessarily sure how talented he is, but yeah, I lean sell high on Kamara if anyone is treating him like a locked in RB2 the rest of the way.
Yeah, I mean, you would need a knowledgeable enemy in this trade who understands that Kendre Miller was taking a lot of work, right? Because otherwise people are gonna be like, what are you talking about? I don't want Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara is averaging 3.6 yards per carry, career low. Alvin Kamara is averaging 4.9 yards per reception, career low. Alvin Kamara has one touchdown all season. So it's a tough sell on Kamara. You need someone in your league to be like, oh, Kendre Miller absence matters a lot. I'd be selling on Kamara here. Also, I know Chris Olave was the subject of some NFL trade rumors, not fantasy, NFL trade rumors. That's a hard one for me to see. I think it's way, way more likely, and I think this has been reported, way more likely that they do an extension with Chris Olave, clearly a very good young wide receiver, than it is that they trade Chris Olave here at the deadline.
Also, for the short term, we've seen the last 3 games prior to last week that Kamara's receiving usage has really correlated with then drowning out Juwan Johnson underneath. But then last week, they, out of nowhere, took away Kamara's receiving usage. We get tight end 1 Johnson back. And I know a lot of people are just super desperate right now because there are 6 teams on bye and so many injuries. So just know, if they're going to continue to use Kamara that way, where he has to handle more carries, there's a chance where Juwan Johnson's once again a top 12 tight end. Yeah,
and Juwan Johnson's usage has been fine, even with Taysom and Moreau coming back. Juwan Johnson usage has still been pretty solid. He's hanging on.
I know everyone panicked about Taysom Hill coming back, but under Kellen Moore, he doesn't play the same role as last year. He's strictly a wildcat quarterback now.
Yeah, love Kellen Moore. Eagles miss Kellen Moore. I know that's unrelated. Yeah. I just wanted to put that out there. Okay. 2 more quick ones I just want to hit on while we're talking about NFL trade deadline. I've seen some Chigakonkwo trade rumors out there. That makes a little bit of sense to me. If you're in some deep dynasty league or something, Gunnar Helm, I think, is worth having on your team ahead of that. And then Jerome Ford would make a ton of sense for the Browns to trade, I think. Just no reason to have Jerome Ford on your team when you can go with Judkins and Dylan Sampson. So, just want to note that there as well. Those are 2 more guys that could get traded ahead of November 4th. Reminder, this show is brought to you by our friends at DraftKings. The NFL season is indeed here, and there is no better way to get closer to the action than with the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app. the ultimate destination for football fans. Right now, our friends at DK are giving new customers a chance to play free for their share of millions in prizes with their first deposit on the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app. Download the app and enter promo code ETR or scan the QR code to play free for your share of millions with your first deposit. That's for new DraftKings customers. Just download the app. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. Minimum $5 deposit required. One single-use $3 ticket rewarded. Ticket rewards are site credits valid for use on eligible DraftKings contests. Ticket rewards expire 14 days after being issued. Ends on December 31st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. See terms at DraftKings.com/promotions. Sponsored by DraftKings. All right. Get a lot of questions this time of year about schedules and schedules to attack. And we got a question here from D. Bailey. He said, what are a few trades for players/teams with amazing playoff schedules you would trade for or even be willing to overpay for if you are currently 6-1? Shout out to you, D. Bailey, 6-1 record. I'm going to talk about a few that come to mind here. Daigle, the first one I want to talk about is the Tampa Bay Bucs as I pull up their schedule here. Not only do the Bucs have a very strong schedule here, obviously this week they play the Saints, then they have the bye. Down the stretch, they get to play Arizona week 13, New Orleans week 14, Atlanta week 15 at home, Carolina week 16, Miami week 17. That is really, really strong. And then on top of that, with all these injuries that they're sustaining, now you remove Mike Evans. Maybe you remove Chris Godwin at some point down the line. It's also getting condensed into this schedule. So I'm actually really excited about buying on Bucs guys right now. We have Tez Johnson, the one who weighs less than me somehow, up at 122 in the rest of season, top 150. Daigle, thoughts on making moves for Bucs guys right now?
It's a really complicated question because there are so many moving pieces. We don't have a timeline for Chris Godwin, first of all. We luckily got a Wednesday injury report, which we never do, but they already, Godwin and Bucky Irving, got ruled out for this upcoming week, which we've projected for a couple of weeks now that they were going to be out beyond the bye. But again, we don't know for Godwin since this is the second time he's going to miss time. The 2 games he came back, you couldn't even start him. He was that bad and trying to come back from injury. And so that's also my concern is that when we get Godwin back, again, we can't play him until we're proven that we can play him. And then we have Emeka Egbuka, who's now going to soak up all the touches without Evans for the rest of the year and potentially even when Godwin comes back. So I think the most competent options are Egbuka, K. Dotton on waiver wires, and Tez Johnson as well. Since it seems like with Tez playing more of the slot than Sterling Shepard, being the more explosive young rookie and having 2 long touchdowns now from Baker Mayfield, the 1 touchdown this past week on Monday night as well, they manufactured that screen for him and he just spun around and took it upfield. So I would imagine he's earning the coach's staff its trust as well. And if that's the case, then yeah, he's the guy who's going to stay on the field in 3 wide receiver sets, even if Godwin returns. So yeah. Egbuka's the guy I want. Baker Mayfield, without Evans and Godwin, I'm a bit tepid about, even with that schedule, given that he doesn't provide a rushing floor. And yeah, otherwise we're just we're waiting out the Bucs right now.
Yeah. We did drop Baker Mayfield 12 spots in the rankings here, which I think makes sense with the Mike Evans injury. He is just such a touchdown scorer. So I agree. Baker stuff definitely got worse. My question to you, Daigle, was going to be what you said. How confident are you that Sterling Shepard does not stay on the field with Egbuka and Godwin and Tez Johnson stays on the field? Because I want to say that it's definitely going to be Tez, Godwin, and Egbuka down the stretch when all these guys are healthy. I'm just worried there's some shower narrative stuff going on there. There's some reliability, veteran reliability stuff, and they could play Shepard in the slot with Godwin and Egbuka outside. I don't think that's their best set. I think their best set should be Godwin in the slot, Tez and Egbuka on the outside. But you're not going to believe this, but teams don't listen to me. But yeah, how confident are you that Sterling Shepard is just out when all these guys are healthy?
Not confident, but also that wouldn't matter because as we saw on Monday night, you really can't play Shepard anyways. When he gets 7 targets and turns it into 25 receiving yards, not a player we're concerned about. So right now, the opportunity cost to pick up Tez Johnson is negligent. 21 fab, probably most likely in your league, and that's probably too high. And so you just take that and we'll just ride out the wave and see what happens after their bye.
Yeah, I like having Tez Johnson on my team here as well and just kind of see what happens.
Also, shout out to Mark's friend, who is an ETR subscriber. He didn't mention this to you behind the scenes, but I know. And somehow used the ETR ranks in a DraftKings best ball contest, got Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, JSN, and with his Baker stacks, this is the point here, Tez Johnson in the last round out of nowhere that I guess we may have propped up in the 20th round. So shout out to us. And I didn't look that far into our ranks, apparently.
I do not. I have 0, so I do not think we propped him up in the ranks at all. But yeah, maybe he knows ball, and he thought a 145-pound kid who was the 5th or 6th wide receiver for the Bucs would be impactful down the stretch. Shout out to him. What about Baker versus Dart? If you want to sort by quarterbacks here, Jack, I think Baker versus Dart is an interesting question here. Obviously, with Dart, you get the rushing. This would be a no-brainer for me if Malik Neighbors was healthy. It would be Dart. Can Jaxson Dart sustain this throwing to like Wan'Dale Robinson and Theo Johnson? I was so impressed with what he did in Denver, but yeah Daigle, any takes on Dart versus Baker?
The last month, so he's made 4 full starts. He's been the QB4 in points per game, averaging 8.5 carries. And what makes me so high on him, higher than Baker Mayfield rest of season, is that we did just get the murderer's row that he should not have performed well against. The Eagles, and then, of course, in Denver, who their calling card has been shutting down rushing quarterbacks entirely. And he goes in and makes them look like the ones that they have no idea how to defend. So I would say with that out of the way, how can you not have confidence in Jaxson Dart moving forward?
It's just a reminder how much rushing matters for fantasy quarterbacks. You know, like Baker's obviously a way better quarterback, even without Evans, has way better weapons. And I think it's really close, but I don't have a problem with having Dart ahead. We're at 92 overall on Dart here, 98 overall on Baker.
We could be getting Darius Slayton back this week. We'll still have to see that receiving room shake out.
Yes. Okay, we mentioned the Raiders' schedule. Just getting back to strong schedules down the stretch. I'm not sure there's like anything actionable here, but I was looking at Detroit's schedule, and man, oh man. I think this team plays so much better. I'm so much more confident using them when they are on turf. They only have 2 games inside. They only have 2 games outside the rest of the season. That is weeks 10 and 11. In week 9, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, all their games will be in domes. Their only road games they have in that stretch at Los Angeles and at Minnesota. So if you're looking for guys to buy here that have a good schedule, in theory at least, Jameson Williams would be a buy low. I don't know if you have any takes here, Jack, on this Lions stuff. The Jameson Williams story, you could get him probably for cheap right now. I tweeted about Jameson Williams earlier this week, and people were just like, yeah, drop him. He sucks. And I was like, man, I don't drop guys like Jameson Williams when they're going to be playing on turf a lot, and he's in a really good offense and still is out there on almost every snap. I do not like the way they're using him this year. That doesn't mean that it can't change. And so if someone wants to give me Jameson Williams for cheaply right now, I would certainly be doing that. I understand the other side of the argument though, Jack, which is he's clearing it out and Amon-Ra is just wide open underneath on every play. And why change that when Amon-Ra is having so much success underneath? So Jack, what do you think about buying low on Jameson right now, and any other Lions thoughts?
Yeah, I think if you can get JMO for cheap, it makes sense. We know that he's such a boomer bust guy, and if he ever has a long, 50-plus yard touchdown reception, his value is going to look a lot different a week later. With that being said, the usage this year hasn't been as strong as last year, as we were hoping for, especially off the extension. And I do think that they're funneling a lot more to Amon-Ra St. Brown so far this year, and that kind of shows up in the target shares. St. Brown's higher than last year. JMO is lower. But if people are thinking about dropping him, I think he's a very easy buy low target. I don't think he's even close to droppable at this point. But I also don't think that you want him in your fantasy starting lineups at this point either.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say better in best ball because that is overused, and just like, I don't think people understand what they're saying when they say that. Like, guys who get 12 points a week are actually really valuable in best ball. But from a season-long perspective, I get that it's hard trying to pinpoint when you can start Jameson Williams. Will I take a 0 or will I get 25? That can be hard to stomach. The way that I think playing season-long is right, though, is you want to have guys in your lineup that can get to 25. Like, 8 doesn't matter that much to me in a season-long lineup. 25 matters a lot. And so I like buying Jameson Williams here on the turf. They're going to get go into the bye here and hopefully come out with a better plan for getting Jameson Williams more involved after they talked about it all offseason. Last one here, Mark, and I don't want to give away too much we're going to talk about later, but I know we've already mentioned this last week. Baltimore Ravens, 1-5. Desperation situation. I understand Lamar's probably not fully healthy. We don't even know if he's going to start this week. But not only are they desperate and focused, they're also getting healthier. And they also have this outrageous schedule coming up. So again, just circling back on teams you can try to buy that have really good schedules down the stretch. Ravens get to play Jets, Bengals, Steelers, Bengals, Patriots, Packers to finish out their fantasy regular season. Mark, what do you think about Ravens rest of way?
Still love the Ravens as a buy in pretty much all formats. There is some uncertainty on if Lamar will start in week 8, but the Ravens are currently 6.5 point favorites. So if we do lean into the Vegas lines as we did with the Jets last week, Vegas certainly expecting Lamar Jackson to start this game for Baltimore. And, we got the ping pong table narrative as well coming out of Baltimore. They removed all the games, all the fun from the locker room. They're dialing it up, baby. They need to come back. So I certainly like buying the Ravens here. I think, Derrick Henry and Zay Flowers, clearly the best options. Just with Isaiah Likely back and running a lot of routes the previous week, things can get distributed quite a bit through Bateman, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. You also have DeAndre Hopkins eating in now. So, I expect big things from the Ravens offense, but I think Henry, Lamar, Zay are the best fantasy buys. And just a couple other teams to toss out strong fantasy schedules that I was looking at. The 49ers is one of my favorites. They get the Titans, Colts, and Bears. And with the 49ers, I know they played well on defense against the Falcons, but losing Nick Bosa and Fred Warner, I expect their defense to give up some points down the stretch. And, the injuries there are opening up consistent opportunities for others. We also have the Vikings, which the Vikings are a really interesting team rest of season because we don't know what's going to happen with the quarterback, but they get the Cowboys, Giants, and Lions in the fantasy playoffs as well. Cowboys and Lions, I think set up as big shootouts there. Maybe people are worried about Justin Jefferson with JJ McCarthy, potentially coming back in the uncertainty. I think he could be an interesting buy low guy that, could easily win you a fantasy playoff week.
One more thing to add on Ravens. This is the final year of Mark Andrews' contract. I think it'll be sharp to trade him, especially if they lose a couple more games. I think it'll be sharp to trade Mark Andrews. So if you're in a deeper league, I think a stash on Isaiah Likely makes sense. We do have Isaiah Likely in there at 150 overall in the rest of the season, top 150. All right. Let's go to some tough spots here, Daigle. This Saquon Barkley stuff, man. I mean, I liked Saquon Barkley before this season. I did not think that the run blocking of this offensive line could fall off so precipitously year over year. The optimistic take would be they're getting healthier. Landon Dickerson was back. Lane Johnson appears to be getting healthier. But they're just not playing at the same level. We've talked about the Kellen Moore stuff as well. We're hanging in at 13 overall here on Saquon Barkley. I could see why people would be like, man, you guys are crazy. You should have James Cook. You should have Josh Jacobs ahead of Saquon Barkley. Daigle, what do you think about handling Barkley rest of season?
I get it. It can be frustrating, but we also know the upside of Barkley as shown last year. Even this year, I know it's common to cite how he's facing a higher rate of 8-man boxes, but when the Eagles have faced 5 inside the box or fewer this year, Barkley's still averaging 3 yards per carry. It's pitiful right now, and it's some his fault, it's some the offensive line fault, it's some Kevin Petula's fault, it's everyone involved. But similar to the Eagles passing game where us have never shown up to this show and said, sell AJ Brown, sell Devonta Smith at their lowest points because they're all too talented. You just assume they'll figure it out. We got it for a little bit. 14 yards per attempt is not sustainable. I understand that they did against the Vikings, but that's what can happen when you're that elite on offense. So I think you should hold Barkley. If you want to shop him around again because you can get good value, fine. But I just don't think as a player you can get proper value for right now. So like all of the Eagles, I'm just continuing to hold and start them weekly.
Yeah, I mostly agree on all that on Saquon. Like, if you want to tell me you'd rather have James Cook or Josh Jacobs, that's fine. But to say that Saquon Barkley is dust, I think is just wrong. And maybe what Jalen Hurts showed against the Vikings will open it up more. Like teams will start playing more coverage against the Eagles. Maybe. I mean, I doubt it, but maybe. And then I'll open up a little bit more for Saquon.
I do think Saquon is a pretty solid buy low at this point, just because the next 2 weeks they get the Giants this week, who we struggled against a couple weeks ago. Then they have their bye, Packers and Lions on tap after that, which isn't ideal. But then like the final 6 games of the fantasy regular season and into the playoffs are pretty elite for the Eagles. They get the Cowboys, Bears, Chargers, Raiders, Commanders, and Bills. And in our DVP stuff, those are all positive matchups for running backs. So as Daigle alluded to, I just like betting on the talent. And that's when people were freaking out about the Eagles passing game early on. It's like, you just have to have faith in them figuring this out. I mean, Jeff Stoutland, one of the best offensive line coaches in history, they still have the talent there on the offensive line. Saquon, I think, is still capable of busting those long runs. So I think at this point, given the history of the Eagles over the past few seasons, just betting on them to figure it out and find success is the camp I want to be in.
All right, Jack, let's go to this Panthers running back situation. I mean, I was wrong. And I won. I was talking, and I never do this. I never use a reply button on Twitter, but there were so many people giving me like brain dead takes on the Panthers backfield. And I was like, fine, let's bet. That's why, like, the explosion of gambling maybe has not been great for society, but it is great for, if you want to have a take, let's bet on it, man. Let's just bet on it. And guess what? I replied to like 7 people, and I was like, fine, let's bet on who will have more touches this week, week 7, Rico or Chuba. None of them replied in my DMs, shockingly. And I would have won, but I wouldn't have won in the way that I thought, because I was wrong. Yeah. I thought it'd be way more Rico than it was. Chuba started this game in week 7 as he came off injury, and it was like full-blown series by series. Rico ended up edging out Chuba Hubbard narrowly in touches, so I would have won the bet. But anyways, Jack, we have Rico at 88 overall rest of season, Chuba at 93. I'm worried that these guys are just going to cancel each other out rest of way. But what do you think about Panthers running backs rest of season?
Yeah, I think it was definitely discouraging to see what we saw this past weekend with the series by series split, like you said. The thing is, Rico was far more effective once again. Chuba was at 2.2 yards per carry. Rico Dowdle, 17 carries for 76 yards. Dave Canales came out after the game and said that they're going to continue to use both backs pretty equally. I mean, I feel like it can only go on for so long before Rico really starts to distance himself if this efficiency difference keeps up. So I think that it's going to be frustrating in the short term, but I do think there's a point at which if Dowdle continues to be the more efficient back, you could probably buy him low if people are seeing this 50-50 split and think it's going to continue to be that way. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking the next 2 or 3 weeks, I do think it's going to continue to be pretty much the exact split we saw this past Sunday, where it was series by series.
Yeah. I guess, like, once you give Chuba the money and he's been like a team captain and team leader, it's hard for me to see like long term. Like, my take was short term, Rico's going to be way ahead, and then longer term, it'll be more Chuba. I kind of think they're going to be stubborn with the money on Chuba. And so, yeah, I don't know, man.
We recorded midweek last week, and towards the end of the week, Canales came out and said he wouldn't name what the usage would be. And when he was hiding from it, I knew the answer. That's when I realized it was going to be Chuba, and he was too scared to tell everybody. But I think it is going to work in the inverse now, where Dowdle will be so good on those touches that they'll eventually slowly start canceling out Hubbard as we move along.
Yeah. It's one thing for like Detroit and Seattle to share backfield 50-50, right? Because they can score a bunch of touchdowns. They can get a lot of running back carries off. I don't know how many games the Panthers are going to get like 40 running back carries off or 30 running back carries off. And so it's just worse, I think, for this.
It feels like situation. Seattle, and ask anyone with Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. It's not fun at all to have those guys.
All right. Mark, let's go to Kansas City running back. We did move up Isaiah Pacheco a lot. You're starting to see him widen the gap between him and Kareem Hunt. But at the same time, I still kind of think that they prefer Kareem Hunt at the goal line. And I still kind of think that Brashard Smith is going to be the back in passing situations. So I'm not that excited about this. I know Silva was. Silva was excited for Pacheco too. I'm just not that excited about Pacheco in the setup. And by the way, the Chiefs throw it every time in the red zone. They're the only team, like they get down to the 5-yard line. What's our play call? Throw it 3 straight times. You know what I mean? And like not very many teams do that. So obviously that's not great for Pacheco, even if he did start to steal stuff from Kareem Hunt. Jack, why don't you flip to Kansas City here real quick? And Mark, what do you think about Kansas City backfield? I know Brashard Smith, Pacheco have been hot topics.
So similar to Kamara, I agree with you, Adam, here that I think Pacheco is a bit more of a sell high at this point in time after the good game. I do think we're probably a little bit high on him in the rest of the season ranks, just after thinking about this for a little bit longer today. Before Mahomes got sat in this past game against the Raiders, Pacheco did have 13 carries to Hunt's 4 and Brashard Smith's 3. So he did have the early down rushing role there. But at this point in time, Pacheco is still without a carry inside the 5-yard line. Kareem Hunt has 4 of those carries. Pacheco's TD this past week came from 7 yards out. So when you look at the elevation of Brashard Smith in the pass game, and then you have Kareem Hunt in the goal line and short yardage role, I'm just not sure that the weekly production is going to be there from Pacheco. And Andy Reid had a quote in the Coach Speak Index. Shout out to Greg over there doing great work. He had this quote on Brashard Smith, which I thought was a pretty big comment for him. He said, quote, he's got the protections down now, so he can stand back there and still protect. And, if Brashard Smith, if they're going to trust him in pass protection and in the pass game, and again, Kareem Hunt stealing goal line role with how much this Kansas City team passes, I'm just not sure you're getting more than like 12 to 15 touches from Pacheco a week. And in the league's best offense, like that's fine. But I think it's more of a flex play than like a locked in RB2 play every week.
I mean, what are 12 to 15 touches worth if they're like 1st and 10 from their own 30,
For sure.
And like, it's just not an exciting player to me at all. I think it is a sell high. Like you could definitely sell Pacheco because he's the lead back on one of the NFL's best offenses, so I kind of like that move there.
Even in the first half, Brashard Smith was the only running back with a target. This is just their role now. And as Mark said, it's Hunt on the goal line. The thing is, Hunt's also really good at that role. Like he's not going to lose it.
Yeah.
I think Jack was a little higher. I don't know if he has a take on liking Pacheco or feeling solid in this rank.
Yeah, I just think that with how good this Chiefs offense has been the past couple weeks, I kind of think you can just entirely throw out the first 2 weeks and really treat them as this like elite, easily the best offense in the NFL type of team that they were 2 or 3 years ago. And I think if you're getting 12 to 15 touches, I think that's pretty valuable. And I think Brashard Smith, I think his role could expand, but right now it's kind of a unique role where he's still not playing very much, but every time he's on the field, he gets the ball. So I kind of am treating him as a little bit different of an entity, as like purely just like a guy that they put in for screens. But then Pacheco is really like their lead back in most situations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the bull case is he just comes along for the ride as Kansas City scores 30 points a week, for sure. Daigle, I know you talked about this on waivers, but we have to talk about Oronde Gadsden once again here. Now, as Silva and I talked about yesterday, even if you're of the opinion that it's too crowded there, they have 3 wide receivers, they're not going to throw as much as they did in this game, the bar at tight end, and if you want to just sort by our tight end ranks here, Jack, the bar at tight end is so low that even if you think all that, I still think you should be high on Oronde Gadsden. But Daigle, how do you view Gadsden here? We have him, where do we have him in the ranks? Oh, we have him like tight end 10, so slightly behind Goddard and Pitts, slightly ahead of Hunter Henry and Harold Fannin in the rest of season. Daigle, what do you think about Gadsden rest of season?
The streaming windows have happened in windows. It was Jawan Johnson for a strong 3 weeks as a top 12 option. Then we moved into Darren Waller for a strong couple of weeks. Now it seems like Harold Fannin's and Oronde Gadsden's time to shine, including last week when he was startable, because I've mentioned him in the waiver wire now in 3 consecutive games. What makes me high on him is that the Chargers are getting back Joe Alt on Thursday. And remember, when they had Joe Alt, they could play the exact way they wanted to play and being second in pass rate over expectation. They don't want to be a team that runs the ball. Also now, increase that more because they don't have a running back that can go between the tackles. That's not Kamani Vidal. That's not Hassan Haskins. So they have no choice but to pass the ball with only 4 guys to pass the ball to, and their top 3 receivers and Gadsden, who even with Will Dissly back the last couple of games, 77% route participation, elite threshold, 17 and 21% target shares in that time. This past game also, to get that kind of production, to set the rookie record for the Chargers over Antonio Gates for receiving yards for a first-year player, incredible. So yeah, why wouldn't you want to be high on this situation?
Yeah, I am too. And the part that I got wrong on Gadsden, like preseason, obviously I knew about this guy. Like anybody who goes to college as a wide receiver and then turns into tight end and catches 73 balls, like we're going to know about him because we're desperate for people who can catch the football at the tight end position. The reason that I wasn't in on him preseason was I was like, man, coaches love playing Will Dissly. Coaches love playing Tyler Conklin. They don't love playing rookies who are like kind of finessey pass catching tight ends. So I was so impressed that they have completely iced these guys. I mean, Dissly and Conklin are like not even playing. So from that perspective, I think that it makes a huge difference for Gadsden here. And I agree. I like being high on him here also. Last one before we get to listener questions, Jack, is the Bears pass catcher situation. I also want to ask about Kyle Monangai. Now, a lot of people, if you want to sort by the Bears here before we get into this, Jack, Monangai, a lot of people are asking about Monangai versus Swift. I didn't think that the takeaway was Swift's role is in danger due to Monangai. I thought the takeaway was just Monangai's way ahead of Roshan Johnson. But I could see how people might disagree. Any thoughts on the Monangai stuff, and then any other Bears thoughts rest of season?
The Bears had 40 team rush attempts. Anytime that happens, we do tend to see the backup get more involved. It was 19 to 13 Swift carries this week. I do think that he remains the clear RB1 for now, but Monangai is clearly the RB2. They played him on half of the third downs this week, in addition to roughly half of the early down snaps. So I think they trust him in all situations. If something were to happen to Swift, it would, I think, be Monangai is pretty much the workhorse there. Roshan Johnson played 1 snap, so I don't really think he's a threat at all right now. And then on the Bears pass catcher too, Luther Burden is just way ahead of all the other Bears pass catchers efficiency-wise so far. He's at 3.02 yards per route run according to Draft Sharks, Jared Smola. Olamide Zaccheaus is down at 1.16. DJ Moore 1.34. He's a trade candidate as well that we didn't talk about earlier. So I think Burden is a pretty interesting buy as a little bit of foreshadowing for my move to make later.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Burden only ran 9 routes here in this last game, but I agree. You should definitely have him on your bench. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that. Okay. Appreciate the questions from everyone here. We got a few that we are going to hit before we get to our moves to make. Start with John Silas, great friend of the show, of course. John says, is it time to bench or sell low on Brian Thomas Jr.? Tape bros are out here telling me he dropped another pass last week, shying away from contact. He did. I actually saw that. And he says Trevor Lawrence is not actually good at football, which I think Trevor Lawrence is like average, maybe a little bit below average here at best. We're down to 38 now overall on Brian Thomas. Mark, thoughts on handling BTJ rest of season?
At this point, Brian Thomas Jr. has 8 targets per game. And while I'm not as confident in his talent as, say, someone like A.J. Brown or even like a Ladd McConkey necessarily, I do think like I want to buy these young athletic wide receivers that are getting the opportunity in the pass game. So I think BTJ is still a hold and you play him through. Obviously, he has a buy in week 8 here. Hopefully, like this potential lingering wrist injury that has been brought up a few times can heal. Maybe he just gets a mindset reset here. So I still think holding or buying low on BTJ is the way to go. But certainly, man, the Mac Jones, like the Mac Jones, Mac Montana Jones, creating Brian Thomas Jr. is creeping in the back of my head a little bit more now, seeing Trevor Lawrence play. But man, it's hard for me to not want to bet into Brian Thomas Jr. getting 8 targets per game, eventually producing in fantasy for us.
Agreed. I have Brian Thomas on a season-long team, and I just start him every week, and I don't think that benching him or like selling low is really the move, especially as they go into their bye here for a reset. He did have a little shoulder injury in this past game, the game in London. And Mark mentioned the wrist thing also. So hopefully that all gets cleared up. One other note I wanted to make on Jaguars while we're talking Jaguars. I don't think it's likely, but there's some chance that they go into the bye and be like, Travis Etienne's last few games have not been good. Let's get some more Bayshell Tune, or at least get a look more at Bayshell Tune. Maybe that's wish casting, but we're at 66 overall on Etienne, 106 on Tune. And I think that's right there, like a 40 spot gap there between those guys. All right. Here's a good one, Daigle. The Hammer Bet says, would appreciate a check-in on my Xavier Worthy bags. Chiefs throwing deep to Thornton and Rice getting the underneath stuff. Combine that with Hollywood Brown and Juju still mixing in. It feels over for Xavier Worthy. I kind of think of this like the Jameson Williams situation. And I brought this up to Silva yesterday. He made the point that the Lions running game is just so much better, which is true. But when you, in today's NFL, defenses do not let you get beat over the top. And therefore, the most valuable guys are Puka, JSN, CD, all these guys that are running these like short intermediate routes. That's going to be Rashee Rice, not Xavier Worthy. So I understand the concern here. I would not say it's over, though. But, Daigle, where do you think about Xavier Worthy rest of season?
Well, at least when Mahomes was on the field, Xavier Worthy still had the second most targets behind Rice. Again, we know exactly the kind of player Rice is, so we talked about all offseason, where he is elite and he does soak up pretty much all the targets. And he showed us that with Mahomes on the field, 26% target share, well above Worthy's and Marquise Brown's. But the type of Worthy and the player he is, I would expect more carries moving forward. I'll still expect him to be the number 2 wide receiver for, again, the offense that is number 1 in pass rate over expectation, because they are just flowing through Mahomes this year. And I'm confident holding on to that. You compare it to Jameson Williams. I do think Worthy is viable weekly, more so than Jameson. And so it's an upgrade to me. So yeah, I'm totally fine holding on to it, honestly. And right now you can't sell him anyway. So
yeah. I mean, maybe at some point, if they throw the ball 10 times on 19 routes to Rashee Rice 3 yards over the middle, maybe at some point the defense comes up and then they can go over Worthy. Like, there is definitely something cyclical happening in the NFL here where long passing and passing in general was so efficient. Teams started getting lighter defenders in the box. Now running's become more in vogue and short passes become more in vogue. There's going to be some like always cyclical stuff going on with NFL defenses. So I definitely, I understand the concern on Xavier Worthy for sure, but yeah, I kind of think of it similar to the Jameson Williams stuff where I want the guys that can score 30 points and Xavier Worthy can certainly do that. Jack, if you want to go to the trade calculator, I can read you this trade from Ruby Tuesday. He is injury-ridden and by Mageddon. He says, should I trade Ted McMillan on one side and on the other side, Baker Mayfield and Quentin Johnston? He notes that he has Amarian Hampton and Trey Benson on IR. Both these guys probably back in like 2 to 3 weeks, hopefully, on Hampton and Trey Benson. He does have Gibbs, Marks, Pollard, and Spears. He has JSN, Egbuka, and Jakobi Meyers.
I love how he says Hampton and Benson on IR, and this trade doesn't involve a running back on either side.
Yeah. But he's saying that he could use... He can afford to get rid of a wide receiver,
sure.
I think, is what he's trying to say. We have this trade like dead even in the calculator here. Jack, thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm not totally sure that he can afford to get rid of a wide receiver unless he wants to be starting Jakobi Meyers every week. So I think I prefer the McMillan side, although I think a key point here is we don't really know what his quarterback situation looks like. If he's somehow really desperate for a quarterback and getting, 15 points a week from the quarterback position or streaming and it's not working, maybe you prefer the Baker and QJ side. But I think in a vacuum, barring a catastrophic quarterback situation, I'm Team McMillan here.
Yeah, and we're going to get some Andy Dalton, I think, and so I think Andy Dalton will be nice for Ted McMillan. The yards per attempt stuff on Andy Dalton is better. Like, everything is better for Andy Dalton versus Bryce Young. So I think I prefer the Ted side here also. And like trading for quarterback, if you're in a one quarterback league, I mean, God, there's good quarterbacks on waivers every single week, and even bad quarterbacks. You can pick up Jacoby Brissett and start him and get 20 points. You can pick up Tyrod Taylor and get 15 or 20 points most likely, So I don't like giving up really good players for quarterback. That said, Quentin Johnston is certainly a good asset to have here as well. So that's why we have it pretty fair. But I agree with Jack. I like the Tet side. All right. Last trade here, Mark. Jack, if you want to put this in, Harrison Eller says, I'm 6-1, but my running back help is slim. My wide receivers are JSN, Puka, Devonta, Diggs, Mooney, Shaheed. Should I trade Devonta or Diggs for Hampton to make a playoff push? So obviously it's going to be, we're going to prefer Devonta Smith to Steph Diggs, right? So if you can get Diggs for Amari and Hampton, or maybe we do have Diggs ahead of Devonta Smith in the ranks. I'm not sure there. It's probably close, but I kind of like this. I don't know what's wrong with Amari and Hampton. Like at first it was like he's fine. And by the way, after Amari and Hampton got hurt in that game, he was like on the sideline, jumping around, had his helmet on. I was like, oh, he's going to be fine. Then they say he's going on IR. And then a report comes out, he's not going to be back when his IR stint is over. In other words, he's not going to be back right at the 4-week mark. So I don't really know what to think about Amari and Hampton right now. But given how strong his wide receivers are here, Mark, I understand why he's thinking about this. Any thoughts on this one?
I agree. It probably does make sense to trade one of Devontae or Diggs in this spot, given the strength of his wide receiver room. But man, the Hampton stuff is really hard. Just with the lack of clarity around his injury, he is certainly a back that I would want to add for a stretch run, assuming he comes back probably after their Week 12 bye. Is kind of what I'm hoping when I hope we see Hampton at this point. We'll note they do have a pretty tough fantasy playoff schedule. They get the Chiefs in Week 15. They get Dallas in Week 16, which is about the nuttiest matchup you can get for RBs these days. But then they close it out against Houston as well, which is relatively difficult too there. So man, it's really tricky. I would lean yes, like trade for Hampton. I also think it's fine kicking the tires on other running backs. I don't know if it's worth maybe doing both Devontae and Diggs for someone like Saquon. I mentioned liking his end of season outlook. I could see maybe packaging it and getting a bigger stud like that. Yeah. But the Hampton uncertainty is really tricky, no doubt.
Yeah, I like taking a risk here. You're already 6-1. You're already loaded at wide receiver. I think this would be a spot where if you're going to trade for Amari and Hampton, like this would be the spot to do it. I think that makes sense. All right. Everyone, nobody has listened. They want the moves to make. Let's start with Daigle this week. Your first move to make ahead of Week 8.
Everyone waited all year long for George Kittle to return. He comes back, gets 0 targets, but impacted the game immensely. It's no surprise that against that elite defense as a whole, George Kittle returns. Christian McCaffrey has his best rushing output of the entire year, including 5.3 yards per carry, and Kittle played 80% of the snaps as he was fully healthy. So right now with a 0 in the box score, I am not worried about Kittle in the slightest. In fact, excited about that he got on the field. It was as impactful as he's been in the past. So I'm buying Kittle low at this moment.
All right. By George Kittle. I will say the elite tight end bros are in absolute shambles. I mean, absolute shambles this season. George Kittle, at least partly to blame there. But I agree. I like buying George Kittle. I think that makes a lot of sense. Jack, your first move to make ahead of Week 8.
Yeah, I alluded to this earlier, but I'm going to go with buy Luther Burden. I just think there are multiple outs here where he's been so much better than Olamide Zaccheaus. Zaccheaus has earned targets at a really strong rate, but he hasn't done a whole lot with his targets. And then there's also maybe DJ Moore gets traded. DJ Moore also didn't practice as of today with a hip injury. We'll see what happens there. He probably will play, but Burden does have like a 3-pronged path to being in a full-time role if any of the other Bears wide receivers get hurt. And Burden is just a high draft pick, early second-round pick who's been really efficient on his targets so far and hasn't contributed a whole lot since he had that big game with the flea flicker 73-yard touchdown. So I like getting Luther Burden while he's still cheap before the second half of the season really kicks in.
Yeah, I mean, should not be expensive. I mean, the guy ran 9 routes last game. Should not be expensive at all on Luther Burden. By the way, DJ Moore, he had like alleged testicle issues, and now he's sitting out practice with like a hip issue. I mean, what's this guy getting into at night? Sounds like fun. Okay, Mark, your first move to make here ahead of Week 8.
I'll go with sell Devon Achane, and I bit my tongue a little bit during the Dolphin segment earlier, just because of this moment had to build up here since everyone skips forward to now. But I think this is pretty much just a trade for me now before implosion sets in, and I hate to say it because I have decent amount of Achane and Jalen Waddle as well. But when I look at the likelihood of either Tua Tagovailoa getting benched or injured, and then Mike McDaniel getting fired, I think that's pretty close to 100% before the end of the season here for the Dolphins. And so I think now is a decent time to sell high on the Dolphins and Achane. I think you could get a pretty solid return for. And right now we have him at RB5. That's his current standing in the fantasy ranks as well among RBs. I think it's just a solid time to get out from underneath Achane and this Dolphins offense.
God, I'm like sick to trade away a player like Achane, but I agree it makes sense. I mean, God, this Dolphins situation, man. I'm clinging to the playoff schedule for the Dolphins as like, just get me there with Achane and maybe it'll work out. But I hear you. If somebody's offering something really good, I think it's at least worth considering on Achane. All right. My first move to make is going to be buy Bucky Irving. Bucky, of course, has been out since week 4 with foot and shoulder issues. He's already been ruled out for week 8, but we knew this was coming, right? We knew that he was going to be out through the bye. They have been targeting week 10 for Bucky's return. I'm not certain he's going to come back in week 10, but similar to the Hampton stuff, I think it's a risk worth taking. My goal this time of year, if making a trade, is to try to get a super team for the playoffs. And like, let's be honest, I like Rachaad White. I have an incredible amount of Rachaad White in best ball, but he's at 3.9 yards per carry this season. When Bucky returns, I think he quickly gets back into that 65-35, 70-30, maybe even more. I mean, down the stretch last year, we saw it get to like 80-20, 85-15 in favor of Bucky over Rachaad White. And then in the fantasy playoffs, as we talked about, Bucs get Atlanta, Carolina, and Miami. And so pretty good spot here, I think, to try to get Bucky Irving. His owner's not going to have him for another 2 weeks. If you can stomach that, not having Bucky for another 2 weeks, I think it's an interesting time to try to get him. Daigle, your second move to make.
When CeeDee Lamb returned, I was concerned for George Pickens in particular, just because where they run routes, they do overlap, unlike Jake Ferguson, who's getting peppered underneath. But we saw him come back, Lamb, and instead it was a condensed target tree as Lamb, Pickens, Ferguson soaked up 66% of the team's targets, and George Pickens still hung around there for an offense that, most importantly, has no defense. So I don't know if it's buying high. I don't know if it's buying at cost, but I'm very high on George Pickens still rest of season as he can continue to match CeeDee Lamb. Pickens also, I have no idea if the stat regresses, but he leads the league in penalty yards because he gets tackled and draws a DPI every deep shot he has. And so there is some meat on the bone here for more production. Not only that, but you do get that elite contingency value we saw that if for whatever reason Lamb is re-injured, Pickens did lead the league in receiving yards without Lamb. So I still love Pickens in this offense that as long as Dak Prescott's healthy, they have no choice but to put up 40 every single week.
God, I hope you're right. I mean, I really hope you're right. Yeah, and like to me, one of the best cases for Pickens is simply like, yeah, he's going to lose targets with CeeDee Lamb back, but as Daigle said, when you're in the Coors Field now of DFS playing for Dallas, like you could get 40 plus Dak dropbacks on a weekly basis. Jack, your second move to make.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Bears here and say add Colston Loveland. He's only rostered in 25% of ESPN leagues, so I think he's pretty readily available in the majority of leagues. And Cole Kmet suffered a back injury this past weekend. He did not practice today. I think that he is probably going to miss. And after he left on Sunday, PFF's Nathan Yonke noted that Loveland played 21 out of 23 snaps. I think that's a very bullish sign in positive game script, given that he has a reputation more as a receiver. So I think you can pretty much expect an every down role for Loveland if Kmet does indeed miss. And this guy was the 10th overall pick. He was a prolific receiver at Michigan, maybe not from a raw production standpoint, but from a market share standpoint, because Michigan just didn't throw the ball very much. And I think that this is a top 10 pick rookie tight end who's about to inherit a full-time role in the short term. I think there's a pretty decent chance that if he plays well, Cole Kmet comes back and is just a clear backup to Loveland the rest of the way. So it costs basically nothing to find out if Loveland can emerge as that every down, fantasy relevant top 12 tight end. And so I like rostering him for this week and seeing what you have.
Yeah. I don't know the severity on Cole Kmet's injury, but he was not practicing here today, Wednesday. And so, yeah, like a little runway for Colson Loveland to show what he's got. And I agree with Jack. If Cole Kmet is out this week, I think Colson Loveland plays like almost every snap here in this game. And that's pretty exciting for him. Mark, go ahead with your second and final move to make.
Fit on this a little bit as well, but that is going to be by Derrick Henry. Talk through the great Ravens schedule down the stretch here, and I think Henry is going to benefit in a big way. We have him up at RB6 overall, and I think you could sell Achane for Derrick Henry straight up. Honestly, like that would be a move I would be willing to make right now in leagues. So I just have a lot of faith in this Ravens team picking up offensively down the stretch. So I want to be buying here. And I think Henry is my favorite target, probably just, the most undervalued of the top trio there for the Ravens.
I think Daigle had, or someone had last week, buy Zay Flowers. I like that too. Buy Zay Flowers, buy Derrick Henry. I like both of those for sure. All right. My final move to make here this week, sell Quinshon Judkins. I've seen some wild takes out there on Judkins. Like, clearly he's very good. Clearly he's a hit for the Browns. The problem is he's not really a pass catcher. When they're trailing, he's unlikely to be out there. Even if they get rid of Jerome Ford, when they're trailing, I think we'll see more Dylan Sampson. So we're betting on efficiency and we're betting on touchdowns, which is fine. But when you play for the Browns, that can be tough. Most times when you play for the Browns, you don't get to control games and score 3 short touchdowns or 3 long touchdowns like you did against Miami. Browns still have to play in the fantasy playoffs. The Browns play at Bears, versus Bills, and versus Steelers. So after this 3 touchdown game, I kind of think if you wanted to sell Judkins, now's the time. And I kind of think that I would be trying to sell Quinshon Judkins here, just on how many touchdowns are the Browns going to score? How often are they actually going to be able to keep Judkins on the field and winning games here down the stretch?
Poor Leone spent all week in the Slack talking about yards per carry and how it tends to regress. And it did regress. The Dolphins actually held up their end of the bargain, and Judkins still fell forward for 3 touchdowns.
Yeah. I mean, zero catches, under 4 yards per carry.
3 touchdowns.
And break the slate,
Jim Brown. Yeah.
Indeed. All right. That is going to do it for this week's rest of season top 150 show. Appreciate you all being here. If you have not hit subscribe on the YouTube channel, it is indeed free to hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Helps us out a lot and lets you know whenever we post new videos. Also, shout out to the video team. Did a great edit of Silva not listening to me while we do the podcast. If you want to see that, you can go on Twitter, find our handle on there, and you'll see that very funny video. I feel like they could have gone longer. They could have gone for like 20 minutes of Silva not paying attention to me, but they did about a minute and a half.
They could have pivoted also to a supercut of the way you react every time is to just grit your teeth and say, "Yep," like you don't even open your mouth. You're so frustrated about it.
I am not frustrated at all. Okay, we're reiterating the important points. That's what we're getting at. Okay.
Yeah.
For Daigle, for Mark, for Jack, for producer Ryan, for everyone behind the scenes at ETR, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.